What's going on, Space Monkeys? Welcome to Political Fight Club. I'm Robert Durden. Found some time. We're going to finish up this chapter that we started earlier, The Internet of Dope. This is Dreamland by Sam Quinones, chapter 56, page 320 towards the top. One Friday morning, months later, I sit in a Columbus, Ohio courtroom. The room is so crowded that it looks at first like it could be traffic court, except that almost everyone is young and white. Guys in backwards baseball hats and splotchy whiskers, girls with fading dye jobs, designer jeans, and rhinestone-studded sweatshirts. This is heroin court. 15 years ago, the man brought black tar heroin to Columbus. The city became the jumping-off point for the expansion of the Jalisco Boys system through large parts of the eastern half of the U.S., just as prescription pills were accepted in medicine as, quote, virtually non-addictive when used to treat pain. Now, in a city that once never had heroin, almost every seat in a heroin court is filled. All are junkies. Most started on pills, and 3/4 of them use black tar heroin. Judge Scott Vanderkar annually handles about 400 heroin addicts convicted of nonviolent felonies dropped to misdemeanors, which the clients are trying to expunge. A few months back, this court was standing room only. Vanderkar finally divided the court and extended the hours to accommodate the demand. The early 2-hour session is for people whose last names begin with A through L. M through Z come later in the morning. Franklin County has several specialized courts, one for veterans and one for people with mental health problems. There's even a drug court for offenders with drug and alcohol-related crimes. But heroin users overwhelm them all. This weekly court was formed in 2010, but even it couldn't contain the demand. In another court, for prostitutes, almost half of the women also are heroin addicts. Vanderkar wears a black robe and sits high on the bench, and a very large gavel is mounted on the wall behind him. But the atmosphere is relaxed, resembling a group meeting more than a court. A table to one side offers stacks of brochures about treatment centers and drug and mental health resources for veterans. Vanderkar calls several clients before him, applauds their days clean, and asks about their job searches and whether they have a 12-step sponsor. Each must seek counseling, submit to random drug tests, and attend 90 NA meetings in 90 days. After that, they attend his session every week for up to 2 years. Almost half finish this program, but many relapse. Some die. Vanderkar is a former prosecutor with almost 20 years on the bench. He counts himself one of Franklin County's more understanding magistrates. But years in heroin court have also taught him that addicts, like children, need clear limits and consequences. What it's taught me is that jail is actually a good thing. For those who relapse, he tells me after court adjourns. I mean, give them a consequence of a couple of weeks or 30 days. A lot of time it takes, maybe 2 of those, to motivate them. The fear of incarceration pushed Robert Berardinelli after his arrest in Operation Tar Pit into Santa Fe. After more than a year in which he put Jalisco Boys' cars and apartments in his name, Berardinelli was given probation by a judge who threatened him with a long prison sentence if he didn't get clean. With that, he finally kicked. He spent a couple of years as a counselor in a treatment center. He spoke weekly at a jail and kept on, though many people weren't listening. Years later, Berardinelli was a leader in NA and a delegate in a group's 2014 International Convention in Southern California, where we met. There's no logical reason why I should be sitting right here and not in some federal pen. I'm so blessed that I got out of it and never did time, he said as we sat near a fountain outside a hotel in San Fernando Valley, only a few miles from where the Jalisco Boys got their start. I believe in the power of the 12 steps. That's why I'm here right now. It's tailor-made for people like me. Neither Santa Fe nor New Mexico had escaped the opiate plague. Crews of Naharit black tar vendors had rotated through Santa Fe in northern New Mexico. In the Espanola Valley, pills had combined with heroin. In 2012, the local newspaper reported the area set an overdose death record. We remain firmly at the top of the national list for drug overdose deaths per capita, an editorial stated. The number of kids involved had alarmed Berardinelli and changed the makeup of NA in his region. Now the discussion within the organization was how to reach these youngsters. This had been happening in 12-step groups across America, from Portsmouth to Portland. Grizzled, veteran recovering addicts in their 50s and 60s were seeing their sparsely populated NA meetings overwhelmed with kids in their 20s, enough so that special meetings were created for the new opiate addicts. I asked if he ever wondered what became of the boss called Enrique and the drivers who gave him all of his dope. Not really, he said. It seemed so long ago. But he felt no rancor. They were nice guys, clean-cut, not killers, just working-class boys trying to get ahead, and were probably living back in Mexico somewhere. He marveled that they were the only dealers he'd encountered in 40 years doing heroin who didn't use their product. He was still startled at how organized they were. After Tar Pit, he remembered, there was no dope on Santa Fe streets for exactly one day. That's how organized they were. He vividly remembered the moment early that morning, 14 years before, when DEA agent Jim Kuykendall and his team rolled up to arrest him. Their indictment had held a dozen Mexican names and his. They had phone bills and car titles in his name. Berardinelli was gaunt, pocked, scabbed, and worn out. He could lie no more. Kuykendall led him to a patrol car in handcuffs. "This is the first day of the rest of your life," the agent said as he put him in the car. It took a while, but Robert Berardinelli came to see that as the truth. He was now a grandfather and felt lucky to have survived decades of enslavement. At his request, I passed a message from him to Kuykendall. "Jim Kuykendall saved my life," Berardinelli said. "For years now I've wanted just to say, hey man, thank you." Out in Portland, following the death of her brother Toivy, Elena Seneyev assured her parents she had cleaned up. She was actually using more than ever. She was rarely at home, escaping Toivy's memory and her own responsibility in his death. One night, her father came to her room, knowing something was wrong. They had never understood each other. As he sat down, he took her purse from the chair and heard metal clinking. Inside, he found 2 heroin spoons. She expected rage. Instead, his eyes grew teary. For the first time in her life, he pleaded with her. "Alina, you need help," he said. Alina broke down and cried too. That night, rushing to heroin, she texted a friend and asked for money. The friend texted back, "No, but I know a church. It's different." A Russian Pentecostal junkie named John Chkach had started a rehab clinic in the Portland suburb of Boring. Koch saw the Russian Pentecostal churches trying to hide the sight of hundreds of addicted kids. Parents who asked a pastor's help with their addicted child were shamed as running a sinful house. Koch sold his trucking business, took out a second mortgage on his house, and opened a rehab center. A church formed around it, the first to make the rampant opiate addiction of Russian Pentecostal kids the focus of its ministry. God Will Provide, as the new church was called, rested on Jesus' message of love, forgiveness, and transformation. Traditional Russian pastors called it blasphemy and sinful. Russian Pentecostal kids called it rehab church. But soon, God Will Provide had spread its church/rehab center model to Sacramento, Seattle, and elsewhere. There, Alina met Vitaly Mulyar. Vitaly had crashed since those heady days when he was one of the first Russians to sell OxyContin in Portland. In 2010, Vitaly faced a 2-year prison term if he failed another probation drug test. Terrified, he turned to God Will Provide, where he felt warmth in church for the first time. He kicked heroin, became a Bible teacher, and, with a judge's permission, went on a mission to the Ukraine and Austria as the church, fired by the new energy of its new recovering addict congregants, opened a school for missionaries. A year into his recovery, Vitaly encountered Alina at the center. He told her his story. She mistrusted her own capacity to change. But it struck her the way he had risen from the street. A chaste romance followed in keeping with the Russian Pentecostal tradition, though with a modern American twist. They grew acquainted via hundreds of texts while he was on a mission. Vitaly came home and asked Alina to marry him before they ever kissed. 2 years later, their daughter was born. They named her Grace. All right, we'll continue with the book. I think this is the last chapter, or maybe there's 2 more. Yeah. Page 324, we'll finish up with that later today, maybe tomorrow. Hope you're enjoying the book, guys. Keep fighting that good fight out there.